What's going on, guys? It's Zach here. Bring you guys another fantasy football video. I want to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully, everything goes well for you guys in the holidays, and really wishing you guys the best there. And one of my favorite parts of Thanksgiving is obviously that we get three football games, and then of course, for the first time this year, we're going to get a Black Friday game as well. So super cool idea there. We're going to get four games before Sunday even kicks off, and rather than just going over the single Thursday night game that I normally do, I'm just sort of go over all four games that'll happen on Friday and Saturday. Help you guys get your lineup set, tell you guys what I'm exactly expecting out of those games, and then obviously on Saturday morning you guys will get the video going over every single game that's going to happen on Sunday and Monday. And then, of course, Sunday morning, you guys get the live stream. We'll go over any sort of last minute injury updates, any sort of last second start sit questions you guys might have, and just get you guys as set and as ramped up as possible to win this week. So, should be a lot of fun. As always, I want to give you guys the friendly reminder, and it's especially important this week if you are playing a player in your fantasy lineups either tomorrow or when you see this today on Thanksgiving or on Friday in the Black Friday game, make sure that player is in your wide receiver or running back position. Do not use your flex spots on these guys. There's going to be a lot that happens this week, and you're going to have a lot more information going into Sunday. An example I'd use is, for example, let's just say your opponent has Dak and CD tomorrow. Maybe Dak and CD go off and drop 60 on you. Maybe having that flex spot open, you can put someone like Gabe Davis in there later on. Having that flexibility is going to be super helpful because you'll know what you need out of your team going forward. There also could be plenty of injuries as well. There's going to be a lot that happens between today when I'm recording this and what happens on or going into Sunday morning. So just giving yourself that flexibility is super helpful. You don't want to put yourself in a spot where you start a player in the running back or in the flex spot, start him as a running back, and then realize, oh, you needed that wide receiver to fill your flex, but you can't do that because the flex is already utilized. So it's just one of those certain tips I want to put out every single week, but it's especially important this week. Don't utilize those flex spots early on in the week. So it's going to be super important. I think we got a lot of really fun games tomorrow as well. So hopefully you guys get everything set and rolling. Hopefully we can get you guys as many wins as possible this week. And then let's get you rolling with these last 3 weeks, get you into the playoffs, and get you guys some fantasy championships. So yeah, that being said, let's just kick things off with the Packers at the Lions. This one should be a super fun game. For the Packers, even with Aaron Jones out, I really just don't want to be starting at AJ Dillon. It's an elite Lions run defense. They really haven't given up many fantasy points to opposing running backs at all this season. They're still eighth in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed at the running back position. That includes giving up a touchdown to Deonta Foreman last week. And on top of that, AJ Dillon just isn't it. This is not an elite Packers offense by any means. AJ Dillon just doesn't look explosive at all. You're praying that he scores a touchdown. I will say he's obviously going to get a ton of volume. I bet he sees 15 to 20 touches. I'd bet he finishes with between 50 and 60 total yards. So you're hoping for a couple catches and a touchdown. It certainly could happen. He's like a really low end running back play, probably like a fringe top 30 play at the running back position. So someone that you can use. But in a week where we have zero players on bye, I just hope you have a better option than AJ Dillon. But as always, he might be your best bet. So get it if you need to play him. There's not someone that I'm super excited about. For the Packers wide receivers, I think Jayden Reed will be my favorite, but I do want to note that he's a little bit banged up. He was limited in practice on Tuesday, a full participant on Wednesday, so he should be a full go for the game, but there's always the opportunity here that maybe we see him be a little bit limited in terms of his snap count. They've got a lot of wide receivers they like. They've got, obviously, Christian Watson. They've got Romeo Doubs. Wicks saw the field quite a bit this last week. I don't think Wicks really factors into your fantasy decisions, but it means they have enough weapons that they could consider giving a little bit of a limited role to Jayden Reed. But that being said, he's still my favorite here. He's clearly, in my opinion, the best wide receiver they have on the roster. Just the best at finding open spaces in the zone. He's obviously got a lot of explosion with the ball in open space. He's certainly someone that I'm comfortable starting as like a low end flex play, wide receiver 3 kind of guy. And I kind of view that the same way for both Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson as well. Christian Watson's getting a little bit healthier. He scored a touchdown this last week. He's obviously got talent. He's a guy that can certainly post up a big number. And this is going to be a game that the Packers are going to be playing catch up in. Hopefully, it's a little bit more competitive than that game a few weeks ago, maybe like 5-6 weeks ago on Thursday Night Football, where we saw the Lions just absolutely rout the Packers. But we could see a situation like that, and it's going to mean that the Packers are going to have to throw the ball quite a bit. That makes guys like Christian Watson certainly a little bit more appealing than Romeo Doubs. You can play him. He's been good-ish this season. The problem is that all of his productions come from the touchdowns. Obviously, he's got a shot to score this week, so you can use him, but he's just like a low-end flex play for me, as is Christian Watson. Outside of that, for the Packers, Jordan Love, he's a streaming option for me. Obviously, it's a situation, like I said earlier, where they're not going to be able to run the ball very well. So they will have to air it out. This Lions pass defense is not fantastic. And Jordan Love played pretty well last week. So you can use Love. But again, unless you had like a quarterback injury last week, with no buys, I do hope you have a better option. For the Lions, Jared Goff, he's a great start this week. The Packers pass defense is not fantastic at all. On top of that, the Lions are at home. And when they're at home, Jared Goff plays a lot better. I know it was bad last week against Chicago, but he still got the job done. He's good enough. They've got plenty of weapons. I think you can play him for sure. Outside of that, for the Lions, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra, and Sam Laporta, they're all auto starts for me. I do want to point out a little bit that Sam Laporta has sort of slowed down just a little bit, not as involved or as essential to the offense as he was earlier on in the season. That could just be okay. Sorry. That could just be because he's certainly in a situation where maybe the team is a little bit less dependent on him in terms of their pass production. We've seen Jahmyr Gibbs get a little bit more involved in that line of work. We've seen Jameson Williams get more involved as well. So Laporta's not like the smash top 5 tight end that he was early on. So I could see a scenario where like maybe you picked up Dalton Kincaid as well. I'd prefer Kincaid to Laporta, but in general, Sam Laporta is a guy you're probably starting week in and week out. And then I would sit Jameson Williams. I do think he needs to be rostered. We're seeing him play more. He looks better. He seems more involved in the team. Sort of seems just to be sort of figuring out the NFL a little bit. I think I'm sort of turning around on him, coming around on him actually being like a potentially good NFL player down the road. He's someone that I am comfortable and want rostered, but he's obviously just not somebody that we can trust at this point. I need to see it a couple more weeks. Need to see him very clearly be the wide receiver 2 opposite of Amon-Ra. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think Jameson Williams needs to be rostered, but obviously I'm not going to play him just yet. Next, we got the Commanders at the Cowboys. This one's pretty easy for me, completely honestly. Sam Howell and Logan Thomas, they're low-end streaming options. They're not guys that I'm super excited about playing. Obviously, the Commanders are going to need to throw the ball in this one. The Cowboys are going to beat the Commanders tomorrow. There's going to be a lot of points scored by the Cowboys, and the Commanders are going to need to play keep up or play catch up. It's certainly something they've had to do most of the season. And even though it's a really tough matchup, you can consider streaming both of these guys. It's just obviously not a great matchup, and a little bit of concern that we could see just this entire team get shut down offensively. We know that Cowboys defense is capable of really shutting down opposing offenses. Brian Robinson for the Commanders, I think he needs to be started, but he's a low-end running back 2 play for me. I know he's the running back 4 overall in the season, but not somebody that I think is necessarily a must start, especially if Antonio Gibson plays. He'll obviously miss out on that pass catching role that he had last week that made him so safe, even in a bad game for them. And if Gibson plays, then you're looking at Brian Robinson being truly just a touchdown dependent running back 2. If Gibson sits, though, I do want to mention that does make Brian Robinson a pretty great play. He'll probably see plenty of targets, makes him super involved, super important to the offense. There's no way I would even consider sitting Brian Robinson if Gibson is out. Terry McLaurin for the Commanders, he's a wide receiver 3 for me this week. Obviously, hasn't been the season you wanted out of him yet, but he's still the wide receiver 20 on the season, believe it or not. I know it's been sort of up and down, not something that we've been super confident in, and they do spread the ball around quite a bit, so I don't love it, but he's clearly the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and if you want to play one of them, it would be him. I would, however, bench every single other Commanders wide receiver this week. For the Cowboys, it's pretty easy. Dak, Pollard, and CD, they're all must starts. Obviously, Dak and CD could easily be the wide receiver 1 and the quarterback 1 on the week this week. Tony Pollard, we saw him actually look good last week, which is like the first time he's really done that so far this season. Had a really monster run. He scored a touchdown on. It was really great to see him actually like look like a good player the way he has like the last several years of his career. So a little bit more promising, more hopeful about Tony Pollard's outlook going forward. And this is a good matchup for him as well. So there's no way I'm sitting him. Jake Ferguson, he's a solid streaming option. Obviously a bit of a down week last week. We saw Luke Schoonmaker find the end zone. There's obviously that bit of concern that this isn't necessarily entirely Jake Ferguson's tight end room, but he's clearly the alpha in that room. He's got a shot to score any given week. He's involved enough in the offense, and this Commanders defense is not good. So I think Ferguson's like a fringe top 12 tight end this week. I think if you have him, you could do a lot worse. And then Brandon Cooks, he's a decent flex play for me. Obviously, this Commanders pass defense, I talked about it several times. This defense in general is just really bad. We could see the Cowboys just sort of put on a route against the Commanders like they did a couple weeks ago against the Giants. If that happens, Brandon Cooks could certainly be someone that has a really good performance this week. Next, we got the 49ers at the Seahawks. For the 49ers, Brock Purdy, he's a great start. The Seahawks pass defense has not been fantastic lately. Purdy's clicking on all cylinders, had a perfect passer rating last week. I think if you want to stream him, I love it. I think he's definitely a top 10 quarterback option this week. On top of that, for the 49ers, CMC, Ayuk, and Kittle, they're all must starts every single week. And I want to mention Deebo Samuel. He's like a wide receiver 3 for me. Normally, I've sort of given the advice that all 4 of these weapons in the offense are must starts, but I can't really consider Deebo as like that part of that category yet. I don't necessarily imagine that you're sitting Deebo Samuel on a regular basis, but I think it's just safe to say that he's a wide receiver 3 at this point going forward. He's very clearly the wide receiver 2 in the offense behind Ayuk. Ayuk's just a better route runner, gets used downfield more. And on top of that, George Kittle gets featured in the red zone more. Christian McCaffrey's a bigger threat to score. So basically, Deebo Samuel is sort of just like a glorified gadget player in a really good offense. He hasn't had more than 4 targets, I believe, in like each of the last 5 weeks. Just not a player that's being involved enough in the offense or used downfield enough that I think he's a must start. But obviously, he's a super talented player, a threat to take any touch he gets to the house. So I think you can still play him, but just understand that he's not necessarily like the rock solid starter that you might have thought you had when you drafted him. And he's just somebody that I'm not super confident in going forward, but I'd still probably play him this week. I just want to mention that I'm sort of a little bit down on his outlook going forward. I just don't really believe in him being a reliable fantasy superstar going forward. Now onto the Seahawks. Zach Charbonnet, he's a volume play for me as like a running back 2 option. Obviously, the 49ers defense is fantastic. The Seahawks offense could easily sputter this week. Geno Smith sounds like he's going to play, but he's obviously banged up with the elbow injury. There's obviously a chance here that Geno Smith doesn't make it through this whole game. Hopefully he's able to make it through healthy. But with that sort of hanging over our heads, it makes me a little bit worried, more nervous about the entire Seahawks offense. Like I said, Charbonnet should see a ton of volume. I bet he sees 20 plus touches this week. They'll probably try and slow the game down. They're not a good enough team to win any sort of shootout against the 49ers. So they'll probably try and slow things down. Charbonnet's a really good player. I think he's got a good opportunity here. So I think I'm comfortable playing him. I just don't think there's any sort of ceiling. And obviously the floor is pretty low, even though he does have that volume guaranteed. I think there's a risk that you see sort of like a AJ Dillon level production where he gets those 15 to 20 touches and it's just not all that valuable. On top of that, for the Seahawks, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, they're both wide receiver 3s for me. Normally they'd be like a low end wide receiver 2 range, but for me, it's just a little bit scarier this week with Geno Smith being banged up. There's obviously the potential here that Geno Smith doesn't make it through the whole game. Tyler Lockett was playing with a hamstring injury last week. Sounds like he's good to go this week as well, but just obviously a little bit of concern there. We could see a scenario here where maybe the Seahawks just get blown out. Maybe they pull some players. They've obviously got a big game next week as well. They've got a really tough schedule. So there's obviously a lot of downside for a lot of the Seahawks here. So even though I'm probably playing all the regular guys, it's just not something that I'm super excited about. On top of that, Geno Smith and JSN, I wouldn't play either one of them. Talked about Geno Smith. I don't think he's a guy that I'd be confident even makes it through this whole game. The pass matchup for them is just not great either. There's just no way I'd be streaming Geno this week. And then JSN, looking better and better for the Seahawks offense right now. He's certainly a good player and he's becoming more involved in the offense. He's just not quite a full-time player, and this matchup is not one that I'm excited about. So I wouldn't be playing JSN this week either. And finally, we've got the Black Friday game, the first ever Black Friday game. We're going to have the Dolphins at the Jets. The Dolphins think Tua is a low-end quarterback option. Obviously, he just hasn't been all that great over the last month or so. Hasn't had any of those week-winning performances. This Dolphins offense just hasn't looked as elite as it did early on in the season. And on top of that, the Jets defense is one that's actually very good. I don't expect the Jets to be a very competitive team with Tim Boyle under center. Not going to be something that's super exciting, so I wouldn't expect a whole lot of production out of this Jets team. And we could easily see the Dolphins just get up early and then lean on their running game. So the ceiling's not really there for me for Tua this week, and I'd probably just honestly be looking elsewhere. For the Dolphins, though, Tyreek and Raheem Mostert, they're must-starts, obviously. Even if Devon Achane is active, I would sit him. I just don't see a world here where Devon Achane is someone that I can trust in my lineup. I know that if he's active, it's got to mean, in theory, that, okay, he's 100%. He practiced in full. They decided he's good to go, but I don't even think he's going to play. But if he did, I guess it would kind of mean that they felt fully confident in his health, but they seem to feel fully confident in his health last week. I want to see him make it through a week. I hope actually that he just sits this week and then gets the extra 9 days, gets ready to go for week 13, then we can have him going forward. But even if Achane's active, I would sit him. I'm not listed here as well. Jeff Wilson, I think if you want to get like really sneaky with it, you could consider playing him if Devon Achane sits. That would mean that it's going to be just Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. If this game ends up being a blowout with the Dolphins up early, we could see a lot of Jeff Wilson with them just trying to rest Raheem Mostert. That could certainly happen. So if you're in a really desperate situation for the running back position, you could consider a guy like Jeff Wilson, but I really do hope you have better options. Top of that for the Dolphins, Jalen Waddle. I think it's about time we start calling a spade a spade. Jalen Waddle's like a wide receiver 3 for me. He's obviously got that upside of like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns because he's an elite player and he's someone that certainly I still believe in from a talent standpoint, but Dolphins just aren't really featuring him in the offense. They're not designing looks for him. All of the pre-stat motion is either Tyreek Hill or the running backs out of the backfield. He's just not a guy that's the first read very often. And we saw even last week, Tyreek Hill left the game for a couple plays and then like 2 or 3 straight plays were completions to Jalen Waddle. And it's just sort of frustrating if you're a Jalen Waddle manager understanding that. And then also on top of that, this Jets matchup is just really brutal. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL at limiting production from a fantasy standpoint for opposing wide receivers. Just not a good matchup. I'd still start Jalen Waddle, but he's just like a boomer bust wide receiver 3 for me at this point. And I don't know if that like wide receiver 1 ceiling that we saw last season is going to come around this season, especially with how brutal their schedule is going forward. For the Jets, Breece Hall, he's a must start every single week. My bad on that typo. Breece Hall, he's a must start every single week. He's obviously just a player that's probably going to get bottled up on most of his touches, but he's obviously just a guy that only takes 1 touch for him to be a high-end fantasy producer. Could easily take any touch to the house, and if the Jets score this week, it's probably going to be a big Breece Hall touchdown. So I'm starting him. Just understand, obviously, there's a pretty wide range of outcomes. I wouldn't expect any sort of like week-winning performance out of him. Garrett Wilson, he's a flex option. I would probably be scared to play him, to be completely honest. Tim Boyle, believe it or not, is probably a downgrade from Zach Wilson. I know it's tough to imagine there is a downgrade from Zach Wilson, but I think if there is one, it is probably Tim Boyle. He's not been a quality fantasy quarterback or even an NFL quarterback at any point in his career. Wasn't even good in college. I don't know how he's hung around in the NFL so long. And Garrett Wilson's obviously been bad under Zach Wilson the last couple of weeks. We saw last week how bad that floor can be for him. So if you have better options, I'm totally okay benching Garrett Wilson. It's okay to bench him. I know it's sad to bench for some of your like big name players. Obviously, you took Garrett Wilson in the late first, early second round in your fantasy draft, and you probably felt like you have to play him every single week. And I totally understand that, but you're just doing yourself a disservice if you're playing players just based off of the name value and draft capital. You really can't be pigeonholing yourself into that start. And if you do have a better option, I think it's okay to look elsewhere. But on top of that, it is understandable that Garrett Wilson is obviously he's an elite NFL wide receiver. He could very easily put up that boom potential. So I get why it's kind of scary to bench him. We could see a situation where they just hyper target him with the backup quarterback. It could happen. They're probably going to need to score if they want to win this game, but I think he's like a flex option. I don't love it at all. I'm more than okay benching him if I have to, and I won't be too afraid to do that either. So that'll do it for the Thanksgiving and Black Friday game previews. Obviously, if you guys have any specific start-sit questions related to these games, this video will be going up midnight of Thanksgiving, so you'll have about 9.5 hours to get this before the first game kicks off. I'll try and be up early in the morning to help respond to any comments before those games kick off as well. So that way I can answer any questions you have, especially relating to the Packers and Lions game. And then I'll be checking periodically all day just to help get you guys any questions answered during the day as well. So if you guys have any specific start-sit questions, but those games in particular, let me know. As always, if you guys have any questions as well as related to your start-sit questions all week, happy to help get you guys all set and just hopefully can get you guys some wins this week, get you guys kicked off on a good start to your holiday weekend, and then catch you guys obviously Saturday morning with the start sit video, and then Sunday morning with the live stream. So if you want to make sure that you guys get access to all those videos, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. We need like 45 more subscribers to hit the goal of 1,000 by the end of the season. I really think we can get there, and it's just been super cool seeing the channel grow like this. I really appreciate all the support, and really means a lot to me that many of you guys care what I have to say and are taking the time to watch these videos. So I really appreciate you guys so much. It's been a lot of fun this year, and hopefully we can just close it out with 6 more good weeks and get you guys some fantasy championships. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. And hopefully you guys have a good Thanksgiving as well. Wishing you guys all a great holiday. Peace.